Well, it's December 7th, and most of you say, so what? Well, it's an important day in history because this is the day that we recognize was Pearl Harbor, and that we were attacked by the Japanese, and we suffered great losses during that attack, but it brought us into the war, and that we eventually won. But it's an important day for me because one of the greatest joys of my life occurred on this day, and it was the birth of my daughter Dawn, D-A-W-N, who was named Dawn because she was born at dawn, because it was December 7th, and Lois said it was a sneak attack. No, that's not really true. But it is a special day because we treasure our daughter Dawn, and by this video I'm wishing again a very happy birthday. We're very proud of both of our children. Bob is a very special young man, and we know that he changed our lives as well as Dawn, and the fact that they are both a blessing to us, both when they were born and now. And so we're thankful for our children, as I'm sure you are yours. Today's lesson is really quite interesting because we have 5 lessons here in just a few verses. We're looking at Jacob, and we find out that God is faithful to his promises. He made a promise to Abraham. He renewed it with Isaac, and now he's renewing it again with Jacob. And he is faithful to his promises. And that the world would be blessed, not in Jacob, but through the lineage of Jacob, through the person of Jesus Christ. Second thing we learn is that we can be raised in a Christian family, but that doesn't make us a Christian. And it comes through a personal relationship with God through Jesus Christ, and no more than living in the garage can make us a car. The third thing that we learn is that we don't always have bad dreams when we eat pizza just before we go to bed, and Jacob had a good dream when God revealed himself to Jacob, and Jacob became a believer, had entered into a personal relationship with God. And then fourthly, we want to remind pastors not to wake up all parishioners. I love what John Phillips says about this section of Scripture. He says that many times in Scripture we find these dreams coming to people that have encounters with God, and many times they're smarter when they're asleep than they are when they're awake. So maybe you ought to let some of those members sleep during your sermon. Maybe they'll wake up and make an altar call. And they'll come forward because of the dream they just had. I'm just kidding, of course. But nevertheless, he has a positive dream that changes and transforms his life, which leads me to the fifth truth, and which is that when we enter into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, with God, there's an outward change as well as an inward change. And we see that clearly today as Jacob builds a pillar, and he decides that part of his life from here forward will be worship and stewardship. He's going to give back to God a tenth, and he's going to worship God. And it's a turning point in his life, and there is an outward evidence of an inner change in Jacob's life. So take a look today with me at today's lesson as we see those lessons in just a few verses. We find all of those truths, and I think you'll enjoy today's lesson. Well, when we last looked at Jacob, his travels were going from down around Beersheba, and he's moving up towards Haran, but that's to the north, and he's only going to wind up kind of at the tip of the Dead Sea. About 50 miles is about how far he's going to be traveling, and he's going to look for a wife from his own people, and there on the way he's obviously going to rest. And you say, well, 50 miles is not so far. I mean, we can just drive 50 miles in less than an hour. Joseph wasn't traveling, Jacob wasn't traveling by car, he was traveling by foot. And so Jacob is going to have to rest someplace along the way. This 50 miles It's more than a 10-hour journey as the crow flies, but going up and down the mountain roads, I'm sure a lot longer than 5 miles an hour, and a lot further than 50 miles following the roads of the day. In any case, we find Jacob trying to rest one night, and he takes a flat stone, obviously would put some kind of a covering over the stone, something would give a little padding, and he goes to sleep, and he has a vision. And his vision is a vision of a ladder that is stationary on the earth, ascending into the heavens, and angels are going up and down the ladder. And God appears to him in a dream, and he renews the vows that he has made to Abraham, to Isaac, and now to Jacob, that this is going to be their land, and reminds them of the pledges that he's made. And when Jacob wakes up, he knows that it wasn't just a dream because he ate the wrong kind of food before he went to sleep. There's a lot of interesting things here. We see the fact that when commentaries are written about this particular episode, they say, well, Jacob was smarter when he was sleeping than he was when he was awake, because he recognized the Lord for the first time in his life. Even though he'd been raised in a home that honored the Lord, he may have known who the Lord was, but he didn't know him personally. And here he has a personal encounter with God. And many have taken the position that this was the salvation, if you will, of Jacob. This was the entering into a personal relationship with God that Jacob had. And if that's the case, then pastors shouldn't wake up parishioners when they fall asleep in the service, because maybe they'll get to know God better asleep than they did when they were awake. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. So if they fall asleep, just pray they have a dream like Jacob did and wake up and walk to the altar. The second thing that I noticed as I went through this section is that it is very interesting that immediately upon having his encounter with God, his life changes. And that's one of the fruits of the Spirit, if you will, and the fact that there's an outward evidence of an inner change. And so Jacob makes a pledge. He makes a pledge that he's going to give 10% of all that he has, that God blesses him with, back to God. And he builds a little altar or a pillar there where he pours oil over it and has a place of worship. So you see right away Jacob, from his conversion experience here in this dream that he has, brings about worship and also stewardship, in the fact that he is going to give, according to how he's blessed, 1/10. It seems that he's making a deal here. He says, if God will keep me safe and he'll give me food and he'll give me clothing, then I'll return here and build a church here, a place of worship here, and give him this 10%. One would only hope that that is not a give to get kind of a mentality. We know that doesn't work. You can't give to God in order to get from God. Our worship has to be freely, and the Lord loves a cheerful giver. So we have to give Jacob a little credit here as speculating that his was not a give to get, or if you protect me, then I'll do something for you, but rather a beginning of his walk with God, if you will, by recognizing that God was going to be with him because of God's pledge, and that in return he wanted to worship him, and he wanted to give back to him a portion of that which he had. It's really a great section of scripture to read, and I can see about a dozen messages that I can preach here on the fact that there's only one way to heaven, and that's through Jesus, of course. But here he sees that there is a heaven with angels ascending and descending on the ladder, and there's only one way they're going up and one way they're coming down. So we can see a lot of different applications that we could use to preach from. But I think the most impressive thing for me was the fact that immediately Jacob recognized that he had had an encounter with God. And out of that encounter, he wanted to worship and he wanted to give. He wanted to give back to God as a form of worship. And I think that all of us, when we come to that saving knowledge of Jesus Christ and we recognize that we have entered into a personal relationship with him, that we should want to worship him and that we should want to return a portion to him. And that's my thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.